Hey, and good morning, and welcome to another episode of Talking to Artists. Casual conversation that happens weekly where I talk to artists about their inspiration, their journey, their lives, and what goes on behind the curtain in the life of a real-time, full-time artist. So I'm Kate Taylor, abstract painter who's based in Toronto, Canada, and I'm your host, and thanks so much for joining us. Today, I'm really excited to talk to artist Julia Whitney Barnes. She is a cyanotype artist, so she also does oil painting and watercolor, but the cyanotypes are something I'm particularly interested in checking out. So we're just going to wait for her to join the chat, and then I will invite her on to learn all about her process and her life, which will be great. A couple of other things. I have uploaded just another podcast onto Talking Artist. I think you can get it on Apple and Spotify and stuff. So if you are interested, then check it out. And I'm going to be working on a couple more as well. So I'm just going to invite Julia. We'll go live and see what's going on in her world. Hello.
Hi.
Welcome. Well, great to meet you, and welcome to Talking to Artists.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
So I just basically randomly reached out to Julia, and because I just love your work and I just love the process. And I remember at university playing a little bit with cyanotype. I think the whole concept is super, super cool and interesting. And so thanks for kind of getting this text from a random stranger and deciding to join us.
I think, just the fact that it's called like art in nature, I was like, oh, okay, sure. I bet we'd have a lot to talk about. That sounds great.
I think we do.
Yeah.
So maybe you can start off with, I understand you do watercolor and oil painting and cyanotypes, but I'm particularly interested in the cyanotypes. So
Sure.
maybe you can talk a little bit about sort of how you came to that, and also just what the actual process is to create a cyanotype.
Yeah. I was thinking like, well, then I should like walk you around my studio. Do you like to walk and talk, or what do you like to do?
It doesn't matter. Eventually, this will be a podcast, so it's purely voice.
Okay.
So, but whatever works for you, whatever makes you comfortable, I'm cool with.
I would say so. The very first cyanotypes I made was when I was about, I think, 8 or 9 at summer camp. Like most people, and you don't really think much about it. You're like, cool, here's this like sun print thing, and you can just take a bunch of seashells or objects that you find around and stick it on a piece of paper, rinse it, watch it turn blue. And then, decades go by, and I have a very mixed media background, and I would always joke, because my husband is a photographer, that I work in every medium except photography, and that like that's his like one medium. And then I was always doing cyanotype like a little bit on the side, and I was mostly doing it as a way to like capture imagery to then use later on for like public art or for like source imagery for oil paintings. And then I started getting more and more into it, and I was using it in combination with encaustic, and then I started doing larger and larger and combining them with the watercolor ink and gouache and all that. And of course it was like in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh, well, cyanotype is like, it's printmaking. But generally speaking, cyanotype is considered to be the very first form of photography. So I've also stolen photography from him, and now we're in every single medium. I would say now I'm going to be like, except video. Because making reels and TikTok doesn't count. I don't really think of like what I do on there as like an artistic medium. But who knows? I guess those process videos, maybe they count, but I don't really consider them like my art practice. So I do have this background too in printmaking, and I would say oil painting was probably my primary medium for the last like 25 years. And I honestly thought that like watercolor was very stuffy. I always felt like it just wasn't very forgiving. And I like, anytime I tried to do something in watercolor, I was like, not really.
It seems really hard. Watercolor always seems to be require a great deal of discipline and to be ultimately really hard to get.
Yeah,
well.
so that's like when I see people and they work like when they make something that's exclusively watercolor, I think like, wow, that's amazing when it can work well, but like it's just not my thing. So I love like the very mixed media approach to it. because I like work that's like higher contrast. So now when I'm making the cyanotypes, I'm making them with the intention to paint them. So I'm basically using like an oil painting I would do sometimes, like a grisaille underpainting. So I'm using these as like a cyan underpainting. So knowing where I want to have my compositional elements, knowing where I want to have the darks and lights, and then being able to like work in all the details and know the things that I want to change later on. And there's definitely a lot of experimentation to it. But it took away the parts of the process that I didn't ever really like. So like I never loved an oil painting, like blocking in the composition and figuring it out and making sure I got the scale right. And then like, you know, I'd spend so long on the underpainting and I'd be like, I just want to get to the good stuff. And like, I hated stretching canvases. And then I was like, wait, you know, as an artist, you can do whatever you want. I don't have to do the parts of the process I don't like. So it's been amazing. And I think I've never been more prolific in my life. Just a few factors, like one, you know, not leaving the house much in 2020 and 2021. My studio is in the attic of our house, so it's right here. I like, you know, will like pop up whenever I can. I have 2 small kids, so, you know, I'll like steal away little moments, or when they're occupied with someone else, and then I'm up here every night. And the other frustrating thing for me would be like with oil paint, I'd be like, okay, I have a studio day. Let me like spend an hour mixing all my colors, getting everything ready. And then inevitably something would come up and I wouldn't be able to keep painting. And then I would just be like angry. I would just be like so frustrated, angry, but I have my oil paints. They're just sitting up there like with perfect colors ready to go. And now like with watercolor, you know, like I have tons of palettes all over where we're sitting. And like a lot of these are like little like custom mixes. So some of them would be like what actually comes in these palettes, and the other ones are custom mixes. And, you know, I can like a year later just pop some water into it and they're good to go. So that was something else that I loved. And the other thing is I never liked washing my brushes. I don't have running water up here. I'm like, oh, cool. You mean I can just like dip it and then be like, oh, we're good now, we're clean.
Yep, that's the reason I use a palette knife, because it's like wipe it on my pants and I'm done.
yeah, so you know, it's like you get all of these things through like process of elimination. And I still feel like completely seduced by oil painting, but at the moment I don't feel like I personally need to be making them.
And so I may have missed this, because I'm sorry, because I lost my audio for a second.
Oh,
but when you're doing the cyanotypes, you're actually using a cotton substrate, right? Like, is it like a canvas, or is it a special substrate, or?
I can grab some pieces of paper. I know it's not going to come across on podcast, but like I can show you really quickly. So this shouldn't really be exposed to the sun because it'll start turning. But like, so this is like a little sample piece. So I always do like these test strips just to see how my exposure is turning out. So it's this is Cotton Arches watercolor paper. And I have experimented on a lot of kinds of paper because every paper will give you different results. My personal favorite is the Arches watercolor paper, and I like both the cold press and the hot press. And they are cellulose, they're all cotton. So they're like super, super strong. And when you're painting, you can paint layers on and just scrub them away if you don't like them. So for me, that was like the hugest thing, because like that was something that kept me away from watercolor. So I was like, well, if you mess up, you mess up, and like, that's it. There's no going back. You just have to keep adding and adding to it. But here, like, I'm always surprised when I can just like scrub something away, and was like, oh, okay, that was better than I thought. And I work, since I also use like ink and gouache and all that, I do have like opaque mediums. But you can see like, so the paper, I sometimes use the ultra white, like the bright white, or other times like the creamier white. And then this is what it looks like with the cyanotype chemistry on it when it's just been freshly painted. So it's bright green, and if I were to like leave this exposed to sun, it would turn like browner and browner and browner. And then like it turns like when it's really done, almost like a deep greenish brown. And then when you put it in with water, that's when you get like those deep blues. And like, this is, I'm sitting at my painting desk right now. Like, this is what I'm currently working on. So like, this is,
it's so beautiful.
Thank you. this is like the deep blue. Obviously I'm like working gold into it. That wasn't on the original cyanotype.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, I add in a lot of forms when I'm painting them. So some of them I plan them out. Other ones I just sort of like respond to what the painting needs. And
I understand that you press all your own flowers, so you find your wildflowers and weeds and.
So like this is
Cosmos?
This was a dahlia.
Nope.
So this one was like recently pressed, and then I have like thousands and thousands of flowers sitting over here. And I, you know, when I'm like pressing them, like I shake them, like I knew with these I wanted them to like have this bend to them. So I'll take things that are like naturally occurring, and then other times I just like really shape and bend them. And the flowers can be reused many, many times. Some of them are very fragile. Like one of my absolute favorite flowers to use because it's so translucent is the hibiscus flower. And like I'm putting it on a piece of paper just so it doesn't break when I'm holding it up. So it's really big and really thin. So it just makes for like really luminous, like beautiful imagery in the cyanotype. And because you're getting the reverse, if it's a light color flower, you actually get a deeper blue with the cyanotype. I have like the red center here will turn out all white. Is the way the red, because it's
blocking the sun.
Yes, it blocks the sun, and like red in particular tends to do that. So if I know I want to make like, let's say like a really light pink flower in my paintings, I use a deep red or like almost like whatever the darkest flowers I can use to then make the lightest flower painting. Like here.
That is so cool.
Like this is like another, this was a different kind of hibiscus. And because this one is red, this one will, like it will print pretty light. So it will print like a few of the details of the petals, but then ultimately it will be pretty light. Whereas like that pink one is going to be pretty dark. So if I want to make it look like I'm painting a red hibiscus, I use the white one. If I want to look like a white hibiscus, I use the red one. So it's just.
That must have taken quite a bit of experimentation to figure that out.
Yes. Yes. And like people ask me all the time, like, what's your secret? I'm like, the secret is like make thousands of them and look at every single one and take some notes and have a pile of failures that you cut up or that you tone or bleach or whatever and like do things too. Yeah, there's not really, I don't think that there's a shortcut, and even I still have failures all the time.
Well, isn't that always the secret? The secret is put a shit ton of work into it.
Yeah, and I think like I've always been really drawn to these like transformative mediums. I worked in ceramic sculpture for a long time, and with that, like I just loved like opening up the kiln and being like, what do I have? What I didn't love was that you had to just work and work and work and work to then get like to fill the whole kiln. And then you'd open it up and then you'd be like, they're all terrible. Or like, it didn't work at all. And like, you know, with that, it could have been like 5 months of work in a kiln at a time.
Oh, wow. So that's a bit of, you need a bit more immediate feedback.
Yes. Yes. And so like, I'm like, I like the instant gratification more or less. Like I will do some really long exposures. Like I would say like for me, where the time is involved is like, I will actually be growing the plants. So I have to like wait for them. Like this fall, I planted a whole bunch of bulbs that I know I'm hoping will come up in the spring. So then maybe they'll come up in the spring, and then maybe they will press well, and then maybe they will turn into cyanotypes that I like, and then maybe they will turn into paintings I like from there. So like, you know, they have a long time frame. Another thing is like people ask me like, how long does the painting take? Or like, how long does that work take? And I'm like, well, you mean like the time to grow the
about
plant?
9 months?
So so it's like sometimes I feel like they come together so fast and like I almost have no control over it. And then other times it's just like painfully slow, and I'll take them and like put the pieces like back into my flat files again and again because I'm just like, nope, this one's not working, or I'm just like not feeling it on that one. And then,
and so how long does it, do you actually expose it to sunlight? Like, is it in a
yes.
window or?
Yeah, I do. So I'm sitting, like maybe I'm gonna flip around. So this is
Oh, beautiful.
the skylight right above me, and I have one on each side. And it depends on the time of year if the skylight actually produces like a light that I can expose by. So this time of year, it's already like not good anymore. It comes in at this like really strong angle. But so I have like a UV light and I bring things outside, but yeah, it needs light of some sort. So whether or not that's like a UV light or the sun. I know other cyanotype artists will use like a black light to develop cyanotypes with. And that is traditionally what is recommended, but it's like a very bluish, purpley kind of light. And I personally just don't like that kind of light in my studio. So I use an actual grow light for plants. So I tried to like really emulate the sun, because sometimes in the winter I'll be doing these like 90-minute exposures, and I'll be sitting here at my desk painting and then exposing something like on the floor next to me, and it'll just be like beaming sunshine. It'll be like midnight, and I'll be like, it's the middle of the day in my studio.
I think I really like the idea though of the fact that your hands are in the organic process. Like, it's a very organic process and your hands are in it right to the very end. Like, yeah. Sort of even using the sunlight or something that's growing, it's kind of, I don't know, it feels like it's connected back to that nature, cycle of nature.
Yeah. And I've even like, I have this, this one plant that's sort of a diva. It's like this like Pelia plant up in my studio, and I'll sometimes just take it and put it next to the grow light as I'm processing. I think like it needs a little extra sun today. I'll just like bring it over for a little something like in the winter. I don't know if it makes a difference, but it makes me feel like I'm giving it love. So then I'm like, maybe it helps.
Well, I'm sure it can't hurt. It's gotta help.
I know. It gets so much sunshine in the summer months, so I feel like it helps. There's probably someone on this conversation that's like, no, they need like dormant light in the winter. You're killing it. But I've had it for about a dozen years, and it's okay. It's still doing well.
Well, it seems to be doing well. Yeah, I got one of those little arrow gardens with the grow light for my herbs, and oh my God, they grow so big and so fast. It's like, yes. I love basil, but there's only so much I can use. You know, it's like, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And so you're living right now where?
I live in the Hudson Valley, which is about 90 minutes north of New York City. I live in the city of Poughkeepsie, but it's an extremely small city, and there's like town of Poughkeepsie, which some people know. Vassar College is in the town of Poughkeepsie, and then we're about like 5 minutes away from that. And we had been living in New York City. I lived all over in Manhattan and Brooklyn for 18 years, and then we moved up here 6 years ago and bought this 100-year-old house. It's been amazing. It was like the best decision we've ever made. I think like, you know, we lived in a tiny apartment in Brooklyn, in like the coolest part of Williamsburg in Brooklyn, but it was just like, I was like, all of these like terrible like velvet rope clubs were going in where there used to be artist studios, and I just found myself to be like, I was like, oh, I was, and now I'm that angry New Yorker. So that's when I knew it was time to go. And like, we lived in this little apartment. We each rented, my husband, you know, is an artist, and so we each rented a studio space, and then we also each rented a storage unit. So it was like we were paying rent 5 places for like the tiniest bit of square footage. And I was like, what are we doing? And then I was pregnant, and we're like, where does a baby fit into this? And then we're like, maybe we could fit a baby, but then they're like, the baby will grow. The baby will need other things. And so, you know, I'd always loved the Hudson Valley, and I was really excited at this possibility. And I thought like, all right, how many times have we been pushed out of neighborhoods or pushed out of studios because I got too expensive? Like, wow, we can like
gentrified and
and this is, you know, kind of relevant. So today is Veterans Day here in the U.S., and I know it's Remembrance Day for you. Like practically in another lifetime, my husband was in the Army, so he did 4 years in the Army, and we bought our house with a VA loan. So I don't know if you know how those work, but like, they're basically, you know, loans guaranteed by the US government. So you can buy a house with, without having to do a down payment. Like you have to pay like the fees and the closing and all this kind of stuff. But when we realized, we're like, okay. I'm like, we're
Seems
two
pretty good idea.
self-employed artists without trust funds. How will we ever be able to buy something? And then like, the irony was that like my husband never even thought of the fact that like he'd had this, you know, he could have done the VA loan. And I was like, we can do this. So it took like a year and a half to compile all of the paperwork. It was just like, they wanted another proof of income and another proof of this and another proof of that. So we had to like put like our lives like into like a book of like every dollar we've ever made and spent. And then we qualified for a mortgage. And we bought our house, and we just love it so much. And like during the pandemic and everything else, I just was so incredibly grateful that we could be here. And we spent years renovating. Like you're seeing this like beautiful light-filled space here. But when we moved up here, the area I'm sitting in right now was just completely raw space. And like, just picture the smell that can come with like 100-year-old insulation. And it was like just like dust and fiberglass and like coal soot and and there was nothing, like no temperature control, so it would be, you know, freezing in the winter and 150 degrees in the summer. And there were just 2 little windows in the center space, and that was it. So we like, you know, redid everything, and I did a lot of the work myself. I have like these 2 sides that are kind of matching. And a friend helped us like do some of the woodworking on the other side. And I just learned with him as I went. And then the side we're on now, I did it all myself. I like did all these custom built-ins. I like trimmed out all this, like the skylight. And of course, like we put the skylights in. The other thing was that for like years, like probably 3 years, I had a really sad little painting of a sky. Like I did like a Magritte style painting of the sky and push pinned it over the insulation where I knew I wanted the skylight to go. And it was just like, someday we're going to do that. And then it would be like, oh, look, but our roof is leaking and we need to spend like $5,000 on that. Oh, look, this thing needs to be done. Like, it was just like every time we thought we had it saved up to like get the skylights, it's a 100-year-old house. Like there's so many things that are going to go wrong. You're like, oh no. So I finished renovating up here in January of 2020. And then was like, okay, great. So when the pandemic hit, I was like, well, my studio is done. We were like,
I can't go anywhere.
We were homeschooling our kids then at that point. And so I like just converted a third of the space into like their studio. And then like, I kept trying to kick them out and put them in the basement because my husband's studio is in the basement and they have space down there, but big surprise, they always wanted to come up here. But like, like walking them back down to the basement, like, don't you want to go down here? They're like, nope, we love it up in the attic. I was like, I made it too cozy up here. So then they would always want to come up here.
Well, it looks like an amazing space. I know you've picked some pictures on Instagram, and I was really jealous. It looks nice and bright.
Yeah, and like whenever people are always like, oh my God, what a great space. I was like, but it wasn't. Like, you know, and other people have just been like, I can't believe you could envision what it could have been, because it was really like dank. It was like stink bug season and there were stink bugs everywhere and it was 100+ degrees. But I was just like I was like, but it could be great. And we looked at other houses that had like huge attics, and those I was like, you know, my eyes were just like popping out of my head. I was like, wow, we could convert one of those. It would be amazing. And then I was like, okay, be a realist. What can we really do for the amount of money that like we, you know, that we think we're going to have, and in addition to raising 2 kids. So I think like it's very cozy. It's much easier to like heat in the winter and cool in the summer and all that because it's not huge. And you know, I have dreams of like, you know, building some huge studio building someday. But we couldn't do that on our 1/4 acre that we have right now. So maybe like when the kids are grown up or something, that'll happen one of these days. Yeah.
Well, and yeah, for sure, things change, right? It's interesting you say that people couldn't couldn't visualize the space because it's kind of like, well, that's sort of our job, right? I mean, artists typically are good at doing that. And I know I have an external space that I call Art Alchemy, where there's 10, or not 10, there's 6 artists that share the space because I kind of like the energy of other artists around.
Yeah.
But when I first looked at the space, it was like, stained drop ceilings, and it was painted in dark gray and red, and it was just this disgusting carpet that had been there for about 50 years.
Yeah.
And I was with a friend of mine, and she's like, yeah. And I could totally visualize what it was going to look like because the lighting was amazing. Like, I realized I'd been there for 20 minutes before I realized there was no lights on.
Wow.
And so Lisa was kind of like, I really can't see it. I trust you. I trust your vision, but I can't see it at all.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it's, I don't know, same thing. It's such a pleasure to be in a space that induces that creativity versus some of the places. Toronto's going through the same thing where a lot of the artist spaces are, they used to be great spaces and then they become gentrified. So now they're disgusting basements until they rip them down and build condos. Then no one can afford to live there. But it's hard to be inspired in a gross basement. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, at least like our house basement is not as gross now as it used to be too. I tried to multitask and I did renovations in the basement and the attic to be like, look, I'm not just renovating my own space. I'm renovating these other spaces in the hopes that people want to hang out down there instead. Yeah, but it's it definitely feels good. And I think that just my connection to nature. So even though here we are in this tiny little city and we have this like, tiny parcel of land, we're so close, like within 10 minutes, you can just be like in, like rolling farmland or like in mountainous areas. And it's made a big difference. I've always been inspired by nature and I would like pour through books in my studio and I'd be like working, from these like books of exotic orchids or things like that. But it was always from photographs. So either photos I had taken other places or, books of photographs or photos on the internet. And I think it really impacted my work when I could work from life, and just have that. And like, for me, like from life now often means like working from the pressed pieces. And, I've never liked like when things moved around. So I'd be frustrated. Like if I was like trying to paint like a bouquet of flowers and then, you'd come in an hour later and one of them would droop down a little bit or
the next day one's dead.
One's dead or like got stinky or slimy. So it was, like, I love that I can like shape each thing and then just have it stay there.
So I understand from what you were kind of saying is that you don't always actually, like sometimes you craft and build the composition. So it's not actually although it looks like it's a botanical representation, that's not actually the case.
Yeah. I mean, like so here's like I love that this one, like I knew I wanted it to kind of go down. So it was already like going down slightly. So I was like taking it and like pressing it down. And then
that's
using this for the cyanotype and then also using it as like painting reference. And sometimes I will actually paint what the pressed flower looks like. Sometimes I'll use the form of one flower and like the color from another flower. So yeah, there's an element of like observation and then also like, just artistic license and figuring out like what I wanted to do from there.
And so was most of the process you're doing now with growing your own flowers and stuff, did that happen as you moved into Hudson Valley?
Yeah, totally.
Or you already started it?
No, I mean, I had like house plants. I had like a decent collection of like orchids that I loved growing. But no, in here, so I grow a lot. And then this year, I was doing 2 collaborations. So I was collaborating with a historic garden at the Locust Grove Estate, which is like a mile down the street from where we live. And this garden was started in the 1800s and they still have a lot of the plants are like the peonies and like other things like are from those original plants in the 1800s. And So I've been collecting specimens from that garden the whole growing season, and then I'm going to do a show of work at the space based on their actual historic gardens. So that's like
super cool.
That I was like a kid in a candy store, because I would like go walk around their gardens all the time, but of course it's always like look but don't touch. And then that I got permission to be able to not only touch but just to like cut whatever plants I wanted to, and like, you know, like harvesting the actual flowers, just to be clear, doesn't have an impact. Like I'm not cutting them down. I'm like collecting a flower, collecting a blossom, things like that, things that are going to grow back. And then I was also doing, I'm doing a collaboration with the Shaker Heritage Site, which is in Albany. And this garden was created for growing medicinal herbs. And the garden was founded like in the early 1800s, and they recreated over 150 of the medicinal herbs that the Shakers grew. So that one was very different. So I have these like big books that I've been compiling herbariums of all of those medicinal herbs. And I think it's like at Locust Grove, I go and collect these like hibiscus and dahlias and like just like really like stunning garden flowers. And then at the Shaker site, I'm collecting like a green one and another green one and another green, you know, like, and my knowledge of plant identification has grown so much through that project, because I was like cutting them and putting them into the flower press and thinking I would remember what was what. I did not remember what was what once it was like already pressed. I was like, oh, they look so similar. So then I was taking much better notes, and then I'd have to like bring what I pressed back to the Shaker garden and try to say like, hold it up and be like, what was this? What was this?
What is that?
Yeah. And you realize that how quickly a plant can change, because what a plant looks like a month later isn't necessarily the same. And so then it was hard to identify like what things had grown into. But I'm really excited about that project, because I have done so much more research into the purpose of each of the plants, and I'm going to be doing 2 installations. So one is going to be a site-specific installation right at the Shaker Historic Site, in this old brick building. The building was originally, it's made out of brick, which I also love, and it was the drying house, so it was used for like drying herbs. So I'm going to do something both on the interior of the building and on the exterior. Not something permanent, but something I think fabricated out of vinyl that can go on the exterior. Because now most of the people who come to the site don't actually go inside. Like they walk around the site to like walk the dog or just to like chill out. And it's right across from the Albany International Airport. And all of the land used to belong to the Shakers. And so the Shakers sold the land that the airport was built on to the county, and it was the first municipal airport in the United States. So it was the first basically public airport in the United States, which is pretty interesting. And Shakers were they were interested in technology in many different forms, and so they were actually like excited to fly on airplanes. Like you would think, like people think like, oh, okay, Shakers are like good chairs or like basket weaving. And then you had all of these like Shakers even in the 1920s who were like getting on the airplanes and going. So I'm doing an installation also at the airport. So it's going to be a 2-part, so people can see the work at the airport and they can see the work at the historic site. So I'm not sure how long the work will be on view at the Shaker site. I think at least a year, and then it's going to be on view for a 3-year loan to the airport.
Oh, that sounds really fascinating.
Yeah. So, I don't even know where people fly out of Albany. It's called international. My guess is that they fly to Canada, and that's how they can be international.
I've driven through Albany. Yeah. I've stayed in Albany.
So I just love trying new things, and I think that as much as I love growing my own plants, it feels so much more stimulating to have like all 3. So that this growing season, I spent so much time pressing, categorizing, trying to keep things straight as to like what came out of which place. And then at a certain point, they kind of get mixed around, and that's okay. Like for the Shaker one, I have them all in books right now. And then I want to create an actual like a contemporary herbarium of those plants when I'm done printing with them.
That would be really great. I remember years ago, I've actually always been fascinated with the language of flowers, like from the Victorian era,
Hmm.
where they talk about depending on what you give people in their bouquets or whatever, what that means and what the messaging is
Yeah.
around it.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
just reminds me of some of that work,
For,
like going back into the historical connection and context of some of the flowers and herbs.
Yeah, I mean, the plants can have both so much symbolism, so what people associate as a symbolism, and then also, what they could do. So, like, this particular plant would, like, be for, like, heart disease, or another plant would be like, this is to cure syphilis, or this one is for, like, incontinence. Like, you see these beautiful plants, and then, like, at the Shaker site, they have plaques. They have plaques on them, so they're like, well, this one is for hysteria, and this one is for, like whatever, like random STDs. And so I
Yeah.
think it's just wonderful to see that relationship of, like, people are used to walking around a garden and just seeing maybe like, oh, there's a daffodil or there's a tulip, and then not thinking
Yeah.
about like what like the power of the plant could be.
It's also kind of interesting, just as you were saying too, because you also get a bit of an insight as to what the issues were that that generation was suffering from at the time these things were kind of
Yeah.
created, right?
Yeah, and the Shakers, like, that was their big like cash crop. Like, they were monetizing, so they were the ones who were actually like responsible for like the seed packs in general, and then like being able to like harvest these, harvest the plants, and they did it both wild and cultivated, and they're harvesting from there.
Oh, that's cool. Well, next time I'm in Albany, I'm going to go check that
Yeah,
garden. It sounds
yeah,
really fascinating.
like I didn't know that much. Like, I thought I knew more about Shakers than what I really did once I started researching this project. And like, it's such a fascinating culture, and I feel like there's still like new research being done. Like, one thing is that it was separated, so they were celibate. So through celibacy, like, this wasn't like they could just, you wouldn't be born a Shaker. So you had to convert to be a Shaker. But anybody could be Shaker. So it was like the first, first utopian culture in America to be like completely like desegregated. So they had people of all backgrounds who would choose to be Shakers, and then like all the men lived together, all the women lived together. But then they definitely did activities too. And I personally think that, like, when being in a same-sex relationship was illegal, what a great place to be then if you wanted to become a Shaker. So that, that it was like officially celibate. But part of the reason for that was that the Shakers were founded by a woman. And at the time, if you were married, your husband owned your body. So you're like, well, what can you do as an act of saying, like, no one owns my body but me or but God or whatever. It was like, okay, well, be celibate.
Just like Queen Elizabeth the First.
Yes. Yes. So I think that they were doing all kinds of great things. And if you look at the plants too, you're like, oh, well, this plant was to reach enlightenment. You're like, so this one was a hallucinogen, and this one was a hallucinogen, and this one was a,
and that would change. It was amazing just as you were kind of randomly talking too, it's like how many of them seem to cure STDs, right?
Yes. So for a celibate culture, but how many of them were to cure STDs, and how many of them were like, were for like, to like, this was for a ceremonial one, or this was for like so many things that to me translated to like, y'all were having a good time. So which I think is terrific. And, as an artist versus an art historian, I can just like throw these ideas around and be like, well, this is what I personally think. And it's like part of what's inspiring me. There was all these drawings called the Shaker gift drawings. And they were kind of like what it sounds like. They would make these drawings, and then they were gifts that they would give to other people, but they were also considered like private. And those drawings, I might have some around. Those drawings were like, they felt sort of rooted in like folk art, but then also more of like alchemy or mysticism or so these are some of the drawings. And so many of the Shakers made drawings. And then like this one was said like a type of Mother Hannah's pocket handkerchief, but like the piece was drawn on paper, but it was like drawn with all these ideas, and there's like a lot of text elements in them. And so this is going to be, the shaker gift drawings are one of my inspirations for the bodies of work that I'm doing at both venues.
That's just fascinating. I look forward to seeing that. I guess we'll see it in your Instagram. You'll be posting updates and stuff.
Yeah.
And I understand your next big ventures, you've got a show in Germany, a gallery in Germany.
Yeah, I'm showing with the Julian Sander Gallery. For people who know photography, so August Sander was one of the most famous German photographers, and he did these books of people of the 20th century. And Julian is August's great grandson. I feel like I always get this wrong. I add in another extra great, I think great grandson. And his whole family, his father, who just passed away, Gerrit Sander, there's a show up right now at Perry Photo, and it's a show in honor of Gerrit Sander. And then his father was also both a photography dealer and like photographer. So it's this whole family of like photo people. And like, again, the irony of me saying that, like, I'm not, like, I do everything but photography. Now I'm having an exhibition at a gallery that's primarily a photography gallery, but also like really linked to historic photography. So this is going to be really fun because the gallery shows contemporary photography as well, but like specializes in historic photography. So he has like all of this work of like, you know, early like Henry Fox Talbot and like that cast of kind of early photography. So it's going to be fascinating to see my work like along with some of those like in that context. So my work will be in like the front part of the space, which is a brand new space that they just finished renovating or almost finished renovating. But then there's like in the back of the space is like a whole reading area, so books and like history of photography, and then also like more like historic areas for like looking at historic photographs, which tend to be a lot smaller. So I'm going to do that show. We do not have a date set yet at this point. It's just 2022, but it's going to be my first solo show in Europe, so I'm really excited about that. And I feel like I've been, you know, like building a lot of relationships with people in so many places, but for the most part showing in the United States. So this is going to be nice just to like give people an opportunity to see that work in person. And I'm excited for that show. I want to, we keep pushing it because like, I want to actually like do something like site specific there, like some sort of mural or site specific painting along with the show. So I have to like wait till travel feels definite. So
Plus, if you're over there anyway, it's nice to be able to check out more of Europe, but really leverage the opportunity, which right now is a much more challenging thing to predict.
So much more challenging. Yeah. And like I have this other project that I can't talk about it in detail yet, but it would be involving glass. So having something fabricated in glass. And I have my two favorite glass fabricators are both based in Germany too. One's in Munich and one's in Frankfurt. So I'm really hoping that I can like go to one of the fabricators and like go and do some test pieces or something like that as well. Time.
That'd be super cool.
Yeah, it's like,
wow, you're a busy lady.
Oh yeah, yes. I like I've sort of said yes to so many things and then had so many long-term projects that are ending up coming together at the same time. So it was like it's a little too much of a good thing right now. But I think that like I said, I've been so prolific of the last like 2 years, and I'm like, okay, well, I can put some work there and send some work there. But then it is hard to like conceptualize multiple bodies of work for multiple venues. I have a few commercial galleries that I work with, and that's been really wonderful. Just to be able to like develop those relationships and have them, you know, support the work that I want to do, and then help like work go into private collections, because essentially that's what enables me to keep making other things that I do. So the more things that enter into collections, the more time I have to make art. So I have a show that's coming up with Garvey Simon in New York, and that's going to open in December. So that'll be up for a few months, and it'll be both like online, and then there's a viewing room in their space on the Upper West Side. So that's the next place that people actually have the opportunity to see my work in person. And then I have a show with my gallery in Hudson, New York, which is Carrie Haddad Gallery. And that's going to be in April. So I'm like figuring out what I want to put in which place. And I just met with my framer yesterday, and I'm super excited. I think like the more elaborate frames are going to have to wait for the show in April. But I'm going to be actually like carving into some of the frames and doing things like that. So that I'm really excited about too. Just like, I always think of the frames as like the habitats for the work to live in. And just like the more and more I can like be involved with like the whole object that hangs on the wall, because when you make works on paper, they really have to be framed. And so like making sure that the frame really feels like part of the thing is important to me.
That's amazing. Yeah. Well, I think we have to kind of finish because you obviously have other time commitments too. I want to make sure we capture this. So first of all, I love to end all of my interviews with if time, money, COVID were no object, what would your big hairy ass goal be?
Whew, my big goal?
Yeah.
Oh man. Wow. Well, like I kind of alluded to, I've always wanted to work in glass. So I think being able to see a translation of my work in glass, like huge someplace, like that's a big one for me. One of my long-term goals since I was like 19 would be to design a New York City subway station. And even though I don't live there anymore, it's just like, it's right there. It's on the list. I'm like, I want to work with someone to have the work translated into like glazed ceramic, and have it huge and have it, up for 100+ years. And, that millions and millions and millions of people would be able to see it in this immersive environment. Like I've always had like a love-hate relationship with the subway. So like, I'm someone who loves light. So like going down underground, I like would find like oppressive. And when I first moved to New York, especially so. And then I found that the only way I really enjoyed taking the subway was like doing a ton of research. Every subway station I was in, I would like research the artists and like really look at the mosaics and think about like when they were from or what the techniques would be. So I've done like little scale models and things like that of these subway stations, and that's still my number one. And every time I come up with an idea for it, people are like, well, you'd need $1 million budget on that. So I'd say for the projects that don't concern a budget, that's still like my, my big budget item I'd like to do. Because it's a huge it's a huge budget, but that like, everybody would be able to see it, that it's not something that's just gonna like sit in like some museum's warehouse somewhere, or like, someplace that is like away from public eye.
Well, it's a lovely legacy that, lots of people could enjoy for future generations.
Yeah.
Which is super cool.
Yeah. So yeah. I would love that.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I've really, really enjoyed learning more about your product. You've totally inspired me to do more playing and try something a little bit different.
Yeah,
kind of fun.
I really do. I have to like balance like the deadlines, but then keep playing and experimenting, because otherwise like it's not fun anymore, and it should still feel fun.
Yeah, I know, you're totally true. And that's, for me, I find that's been some of the stuff that's been harder to do in COVID, because I find it's, I don't know, I generate my interest and fun from other people too. So it's kind of getting back to that. But so why don't you just tell everybody your website and your Instagram handle so people can find you? So
everywhere you can find me at Julia Whitney Barnes, and it's JuliaWhitneyBarnes. So I'm on Instagram, I'm on TikTok, my website is juliawhitneybarnes.com. And I feel like my website is great for like showing more finished work, and then Instagram and TikTok have been really nice at like sharing the process. And I think Instagram, I share a lot more of like, finished imagery or still imagery. And TikTok, I try to force myself to actually talk about the process. So that's been like something I just joined in 2021, and it's been like unexpectedly fun.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. And so this interview will be on my Instagram. I'll tag you so you can share it as well. It'll be on youtube.com/KTaylorArt, and eventually it will be on podcast format, which whenever I get my shit together, make that happen.
Thanks so much for inviting me.
Okay. Thanks a lot. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.